Today we are going to talk about the books that I read in January, and we're doing it a little bit differently because I have a shiny new bullet journal that I want to record my reading in. I've tried bullet journals before, but realistically I'm not the sort of person that can update them every time I finish a book, so I created this journal with the idea that I would only have to update it at the end of every month, so I could just go through and tick through what I'd done, write in the books, see what I could fill up. First of all, I got my bookcase spread. I ended up drawing 128 books in this spread, so that's how many I'm aiming to read. I've got readathons, I want to do 6 of them. I only want to spend £250 on books this year, and I want to read 35 library books. I'm also doing the alphabet challenge, so I want to read a book with titles for every letter of the alphabet, if that makes sense. I've done myself a little bookish bingo with various things to tap through. Good Lord, I am speeding through this. I've done myself 2 bookish bingos. This is the first one. I've got some prompts that you'll see as we go through, but I'm going to tick them off more than once. If I hit them more than once, I'm going to do like a stripey thing. You'll see in a minute. I've got a list of, well, a wheel of genres that I would quite like to read through. And then I've got another bingo board, which is less of a bingo board and more of a like holding myself accountable to keep my reading diverse, because it's not something I think about when I pick up books, and I think it should be. I want my reading to be a little more intentional this year. So I've picked a number of ways that I can diversify my reading, like having an Asian inspired world, Indigenous authors, Black authors, Latinx authors, queer authors, things like that, just to sort of give me that push to try and diversify and move out of my comfort zone a little bit. It is a tally system rather than a bingo system because I don't want this to be a one and done, and hopefully it will highlight where I don't pick up books in certain areas as much, and then I can fix that, basically. And then I have my little 5-star book Night Sky, so for every 5-star book that I read, I get to put a gold star in the night sky, which I thought was cute. I don't know if that's going to be big enough for a whole year of 5 stars, but we're going to try. And then completely unrelated, I'm trying to walk to Mordor, which is what that next spread is. So that's going to be like a bonus thing. So you get to see how many kilometers I walked every month. And then I have my giant TBR. So what I did here was I wrote down every single book on my digital TBR. So all the books that I had on my story graph that I said I wanted to read. So I went through them, double checked I still wanted to read all of them, and then I wrote every single one down. Because I go through my physical TBR quite quickly, that's not an issue for me, but my digital TBR, I've had some books on there for a very, very long time, and I want to see how much of this I can tick off. There are 140 books on it in total. Some of that includes my physical TBR. My maximum reading goal for this year is only 128 books, so I don't totally expect myself to finish it. But if I do, that'd be cool, because frankly, I'm not going to read every single one of these. There are going to be some that I want to DNF, and that will bring the number down considerably, which will be helpful. So yes, that's everything we've got in here. Flipping back, let's talk about the first series, because I'm going to start with my favourite series that I read this year. So far this year, this month, I went back and I started reading the Locked Tomb series from the beginning again, and it was the best idea I've ever had in my life. These books are so good. They're even better on audiobook. So my history with the series is that I read Gideon when it first came out, was a little bit overwhelmed by how complicated it was in person, but still enjoyed it. Didn't think I was going to pick up the rest because I knew that the next book everyone was saying was really complicated and that wasn't my bag, and I just didn't want to push myself through a series that I wasn't going to enjoy. So I left it. And then I heard people talking about how great Nona the Ninth is, and I got really confused because I've been out of the loop. So I was like, oh yeah, Nona's the second one. Let's just try it. The audiobook is on script. So I then listened to the audiobook of Nona the Ninth, loved it. Didn't understand very much, context-wise, but loved it. Fell in love with the characters, remembered some bits that made sense, but honestly got very confused, particularly towards the end. And then when I finished it, I realised it was the third book, not the second. And then I got very frustrated and upset because I don't like rereading books very much. And I didn't want to then have to go back and reread Harrow or reread Gideon and then reread Harrow. I just wasn't very sure. So here we are. That's where I ended up. So this year I reread Gideon from the beginning on audiobook, and it's just such a good series. They are right, Harrow is really complicated to understand because of events that unfold at the end of Gideon and in the beginning of Harrow, but stick with it. It's so, so good. So good, so good. No real spoilers, but the threesome bit had me like holding my face on the bus so people couldn't see the facial expressions I was making because I listened to that fucking shit in public. So good. Read the Locked Tomb series. It's lesbian necromancers in space, but it's so much more than that. It's so much more. It's so fucking funny. It's just so good. 5-star series the whole way through. Obviously that ticks off some of my alphabet challenge, which is fabulous. One thing with my alphabet challenge, I'm not going to be counting titles that start with the, because that's a cop-out. So any title that starts with the, I just can't count. I'm just not adding it. On my bookish bingo, this series ticks off queer protagonist, 100%. And I don't think it ticks off anything else. So I'm just leaving that. Cover-wise, I could argue that Harrow could be a blue cover, but it's not blue enough. I feel like if I'm going to have a rainbow cover, it's got to be bluer than that. Like, it's got to be intentionally blue, not just like lovely little dead wisps of blue. So we're here. Obviously, sci-fi. This is a sci-fi series, so I get to take off the sci-fi little shoot off ray from whatever the fuck this void thing is. Lovely. In terms of diversity, this is, Tamsin Muir is a queer author. I did have to do a quick Google of this. I have to Google most of it because I never know this shit off the back of my head. And as far as I know, it doesn't touch on any of the other areas in my diverse little bingo box. If it turns out, I think queer author is going to be a really easy one to tick off for me because I read a lot from queer authors. I am toying with the idea of like, if I get past a certain number of tallies, I then have to replace it with another area, like another sort of diverse prompt, just to keep things interesting. And all 3 of these books were 5 stars. Gideon and Nona, I initially rated 4 stars because I didn't understand them. Second time along, 5 stars all round. Love this series. I could go on about the series forever. And I'm not normally a sci-fi person as well, so like the fact that I enjoyed this series so much speaks to how fucking brilliant it is. And everyone's really queer and everyone's really like realistic. They have very realistic reactions to things apart from death and bone stuff, which is just a whole culture of its own, and there's no way I can describe that properly. The other thing I should note, while I'm just taking an extra long time to work out if these books were on my big list, is I didn't take part in any readathons this month, so I'm not going to tick those boxes at the beginning, and I will fill in my bookish budget bit at the end of the video. Next on my list. Next on my list was The Woman in Me by Britney Spears. This was the first book I read this year. I found the audiobook on somewhere, Spotify I think, and it took me 2 hours to listen to on 2 times speed, and I did it with some cross stitch and I just listened to it all in one go. This book made me hate Britney's family more than I already did. And that was just from like a vague understanding of what went down from the media. This book is so, it's like a bird's eye view of everything she went through, because frankly I don't think it would be healthy for her to go into too much depth, but she touches on various points. And this book, read this book if like you want to get really fucking riled up, because it makes you so angry. Everything that happened to her was fucking horrible. She suffered for 13 years and it just makes me so angry that she was treated this way and no one did or was able to stand up for her. It was a hell of a way to start the year, and it was just a lot, but that ticks off my memoir box, it ticks off my autobiography box, and it was a 5-star. With like personal memoirs and stuff, like I tend to either rate them 5 stars if they hit home, or just not rate them because it's someone's personal story. So I don't know, I either want to show my appreciation or just keep quiet with those sorts of stories. It was 5-star, 5 stars for me, and it's not on my big long list, and I spent a long time looking for it here because there's 140 books on there, and I only remembered halfway through filming these clips that I put those books in alphabetical order to make my life easier. So I didn't need to be looking for that long, but hey ho. The next book we are going to talk about is Lost in the Moment and Found. This is not the latest, but the penultimate, no, the one before the latest book in the Wayward Children series by Shauna Maguire. This was pretty good. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the concept of a big old shop in the middle of like next to nowhere at a sort of nexus of all these doors that held things that people had lost. As always, there was like a little sinister twist underlying this story, which I didn't really catch on to until the end. It was good. It was a quick audiobook. We'll continue to read the series. I talk about this in every reading wrap up because since November I have pretty much read one of these books every month. But for those who don't know, the Wayward Children series is about children who have found doors to other worlds, have come back through those doors and have decided they want to go back again and are waiting for their doors to reappear. But they do so in a school specifically designed to help these children by a woman who understands what it's like because she has been through doors herself, called Eleanor West. They are really good. They are novellas, so they're really quick and easy reads, but these stories pack a punch. They're just really enjoyable, and the children are written like children as well, like they make childish decisions, and I think that's really impactful. This cover I did think was good enough to be put in the green zone. I am wondering how long it's going to take me. Part of me was like, maybe I should just fill it up with as many titles as I can write in there. And then I wrote Lost in the Moment and Found really big. So maybe we're not doing that. I only had a vague idea of what I was doing with that bit of the spread. It is fantasy, but I feel like I wanted to wait for a book that was more fantasy because, I don't know, I feel like I wanted a book that properly represented that. I don't think that's going to be hard to find with me at all, but there we go. This was another 5-star book for me. I highly recommend. There's only been a couple of these books that have not been 5 stars so far, and it's also at this point that I think I might need to maybe add a spread, a continuation of the 5-star spread, if I keep reading this many good books, because I read a lot of 5 stars this month and that's not super normal. I don't think this one is on my list. So my next book is Little Fires Everywhere. This was a book that I picked up in a charity shop at the beginning of last year when I was volunteering at this charity shop. I had seen the hype, obviously, because it's one of Reese's book club picks and she's turned it into a series or a film or something. And I got the movie cover version, which I didn't love, but in the end I ended up picking up the audiobook. This was an interesting story. It had a lot to say about race and culture and about the way that humans treat each other. It had a lot of important things to say, I think, but I wouldn't read it again. I would only recommend this to like a certain set of people. I think we've already got an L for the alphabet challenge, so I didn't need to pop it in there. Yeah, it was fine. It was not totally my bag, but I am glad I finished it. It's about, God, how do you explain this? It's about a family who moves to this like purpose-built community called Shaker Heights and rent a room from this very well-off white family. And the things that ensue, essentially the way that their relationships develop, the history of the mother that moves there with her daughter, and how things get sort of dragged to the surface. Yeah, not super enthusiastic about this one, just wasn't quite my bag, but audiobook wise it worked for me. My next book was Bat by Tessa Laird. This is a non-fiction book that I was given for my birthday because I like bats. It is literally just a short book about bats and where they live and studies that are done on them and fun facts and how their biology works and different species of bats and how bats are viewed in media and just every aspect of bats in one little book. It was a good book. There's lots of cool pictures in it. It's the sort of book that I would go back and flip through every now and again. It's not the sort of book you read cover to cover, but I did do a good flip through of it this month to the point where I felt that I had read it as much as I was going to read it, realistically. It doesn't tick any diverse reads. I didn't have non-fiction on my little genre spiral, but it was 5 stars. I really enjoyed that. Really enjoyed that little book. And it is on my massive TBR, so I get to tick that off, finally. Next on my list was My Sister the Serial Killer by Onion Braithwaite. I'm trying to remember that off the top of my head. I really enjoyed this book. This was off my digital TBR. It popped up on my Spotify audiobook series and it was really short. I didn't realise how short it was. So this didn't take me very long to read. This is where I get really annoyed because I have that tiny little book to write that whole fucking sentence on. Compared to Bat taking up all the chunky books. But hey, I decided to write my books in order, so we're going with it. This again was off Spotify. This is about a woman and her sister and her mother who all live in Nigeria, and her sister is a serial killer. She just keeps ringing her and going, oh no, I've killed someone, come and help me move the body. And the sister keeps helping her out and hiding the body. And it's frustrating, but her sister's a bit of a black widow, and it's not super, the sister insists it's not intentional, but there's a bit of a like unreliable narrator situation because the main character obviously loves her sister and wants to think the best of her, but also she's family and you've got to protect family, and it's like finding those lines basically and finding those boundaries. But this little novel packs a punch. It's an award-winning one, so I got to tick that off my little bingo, and it ticks a couple of my diverse reads, and it was 5 stars. I really enjoyed this little book and would highly recommend. It's kind of thrillery, but in a bit of a, it's just a bit of a murdery book, really. It's hard to explain. I can't remember where I got the recommendation for this, but I did really enjoy it, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed that it was written from the protagonist's point of view, like the sister, if that makes sense, rather than the murderer's point of view. I thought that was really interesting. Yes, highly recommend. My next book is, The One That Comes Before by Olivia Llewellyn. This is another novella. It is a horror novella. It is a Lovecraftian horror novella. It was selected for me by my partner George for a book that will be coming out later this month. We did a book swap where we went out and we split up and went to charity shops and tried to find each other 2 books that we thought the other person would like. We have now read those books, and we have a chat about why we picked them, what we thought of them, and things like that, just to try and see what the other person might pick and whether they got it spot on or not at all, because George isn't anywhere near as much of a reader as I am, but he does still enjoy a book every now and again. And yeah, because we limited ourselves to charity shops as well, it was an interesting date night, essentially. But that's coming out later this month. I got to tick off a charity bookshop, obviously, but that was the only one for that one, and it wasn't on any other lists at all, but I did really enjoy it. So I get to put it down for the horror fantasy. It is very gory horror, like very gory and weirdly sci-fi, but it's also written, like, I wasn't expecting to like it because it's not the thing I necessarily pick up. Yeah, it was weird Lovecraftian horror, and I'll save all my other thoughts for that video. Right, so the next one that I read after this was The Dead in Their Vaulted Arches. This is by Alan Bradley. This I read for another video. I am doing Buzzwordathon, which is a readathon that Books and Lala organises, where there's one prompt for every month of the year, and essentially the title, you have to find a book with the prompt in the title. So the prompt this month was there. So the 3 different theirs. You can follow my reading vlog. It's the last one I put up where I read this book, so I won't go into so much detail, but the way that I'm doing this readathon is I'm using it to try and diversify my reading and step out of my comfort zone a little bit. Diversify, not so much. I'm just trying to step out of my comfort zone. So what I do is I go down to the library and I scan the shelves with my eyeballs for titles that fit these prompts, which is how I ended up with this random crime book that was 5th in its series that I ended up having quite strong feelings about. It was not something I would ever normally pick up. It was my first library read of the year. I'm not hugely anticipating a lot of library reads quite early on in the year, just because I am doing buzzword, but I'm trying to work through my physical TBR before I start requesting loads of books from the library. So far, all I've got requested are like pre-orders, so books that I know are coming out this year that I really want to get my hands on as soon as the library have them. So I expect the library spiral to fill up a little later into the year. But yeah, if you want my full opinion on that book, it's in my last vlog. And it's like a blow by blow. It's like me live fucking vlogging the whole thing because it took me, I read it in one sitting pretty much. Then I read the Sawbones book. This is by Sydney and Justin McElroy. I know the McElroys from the Adventure Zone. They got me back into D&D back in the day, and I knew that the podcast Sawbones existed, and I thought that was quite an interesting concept, but I'm not a podcast girly, so I never really listened to it, but it popped up on Scribd as a recommended book, so I thought, why not? I quite like weird medical facts and like history of weird medical things, but it was disappointing. The humour doesn't translate from a podcast. I was not surprised or really taught anything new. I feel like if you have ever seen any kind of documentary or listened to anything in this genre, you will know all the facts that come out, especially if you've listened to the podcast. It didn't blow me away. It wasn't very funny. It was a bit cringy. So I left it. It was a 3-star for me. I didn't love it. Oh, my next one was Bookshops and Bone Dust. I finally got around to reading this. I picked this up in my big Christmas book haul. How do I feel about this? This is the prequel to Legends and Lattes. I'm sure you've heard of it. It is cozy fantasy, but with a bit more edge than Legends and Lattes had. It is set in the cozy, very quiet seaside town of Merk, and it didn't blow me away as much as Legends and Lattes did. I appreciated the aesthetics that came with it. I appreciated some of the conversations that were had around reading and recovery and like pride and things like that. I appreciated the weird necromancers. This is my 4th necromancer book in January. Clearly I was into a theme, but honestly, it just didn't reach 5 for me. It wasn't as good as Legends and Lattes, but it does work as a standalone, so if you haven't picked up Legends and Lattes and you want to read this one first, you absolutely can. I really enjoyed it. I still would recommend it, but it didn't blow me away quite as much. So that was all the books I finished that I want to talk to you about this month. So I'm just going to go through, in terms of the book budget, this month I spent £37.56 on books this month. That was quite a lot higher than I wanted my first month to be, but I think that was initial excitement because when I went out and did the book swap thing with George, I also picked up a couple of charity books for myself. I picked up some of the Edge Chronicles ones that I used to love when I was a kid because they were there, they were cheap, and they were hardbacks, which they were pretty and I wanted them, so I bought them. But that was all in the beginning of the month. I haven't really bought anything since the beginning of the month. But that does get me over the first £25 hurdle. I didn't take part in any readathons this month. I did DNF. How many books did I DNF this month? I DNF'd 4 books. I DNF'd Among the Beasts and Briars by Ashley Poston. This was just a bit boring and not for me. I DNF'd My Roommate is a Vampire by Jenna Levine. This was incredibly fucking cringy and I hated it. It started off strong and then just got weird and I just, no, didn't want to. I DNF'd The Dark Between the Trees by Fiona Barnett, and I DNF'd Board Game Werewolf by Tony Santarella. This also just was not for me. It gave me the ick and I was quite sad about that because I picked up the book in hardback and it was a cool cover and I was really hoping it'd be a cool book as well. But hey ho. In terms of my walking, I got to, I think it was 147 kilometres this month, so I didn't get anywhere near it. So I only got to cover 2 of my little walk to Mordor squares. Every square there is 50 kilometres, and it's like 3,000 kilometres to Mount Doom. But I've given myself, I would at least like to reach Lothlorien, which is in the middle, and then if I can get to Rhoros, that would be amazing. That's the waterfalls. But if I can get to Mount Doom, that would also be fab. I'm chuffed with just under 3 squares. I will take that. But there we go. That was my reading for this month. I'm interested to see how I edited this because it's my first time trying to edit something like this together. It's probably going to take me a while. But hey, we'll see. I hope you enjoyed that. If you read any cool books or books that you really enjoyed this month, let me know what they were down below. I'm always here for more recommendations. And if you haven't started reading The Locked Tomb, get on it. What are you doing? You have no excuse. You have been told. It is now your legal requirement to read the Locked Tomb series. Thank you. Have a good day.